Section 21 of Stanton White, A Romance of the New South, by Asa Zadel Hall. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 21, The Mass Meeting. The great auditorium was packed from gallery to pit when White and I arrived. Around each of the main entrances was a dense crowd of seething humanity, held in check by policemen who would admit no one else. White led the way to the platform entrance. "What will you do until Mr. Edson comes?" I asked anxiously. "I'll speak, and try in some way to hold their attention." "I shall do all I can to quell disturbance in the audience," I replied, opening the door which led from the platform dressing-room down the side aisle. "Don't go until you see that you can be of no service to me here," said White, turning to the curtained doorway leading out upon the platform. "Hark! There's a lull in the roar of conversation. What can it mean? Ah, there's someone trying to speak. Good. Anything to consume time tonight. Methinks I've heard that voice before." I also recognized the thick speech of our traveling companion of the morning. What was he saying?
"Fellow citizens, while we is waiting for my friends the professor, I have the great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Mr. Walden, who is known by many of you."
Faint applause followed this graceful introduction, sufficiently long to enable Stanton to issue his orders. "Harold, you go to the audience. You can be of most assistance there." "Ah, our friend who introduced the speaker is retiring by the other platform door, I see. I'll listen here, and at some opportune juncture will interrupt the speaker if he gets too long-winded." As I stepped into the side aisle, the speaker was bowing and smirking as if he had received the most dignified introduction possible. I at once espied Seeger standing close to the platform on the other side of the auditorium. Deciding instantly that if Stanton attempted to speak, the fellow would be likely to cause a disturbance, unless his threat were an empty one, I determined to be at hand to forestall any interruption. Two ways presented themselves of reaching Seeger's side of the room. One, the less conspicuous, was to go to the rear of the room and work around gradually to the side of the obnoxious individual. The other was to cross quickly in front of the platform before the speaker had begun his address. I thought rapidly. I saw the aisles packed with a solid mass of humanity. I chose the latter course, and before the speaker had finished his holy-toned, "My dear friends," I stood as near as I cared to be to the red-faced Seeger. "It is a cause of mighty regret for me," proceeded the smooth-tongued orator, raising his voice just a little, "that I am thrust so unexpectedly upon this cultivated audience. I venture to hope that it may not be a home thrust." This sally was greeted with considerable applause. "I exceedingly regret the absence of our friend the professor. But of course," here he shrugged his shoulders dubiously, "men are apt to be too convivial at times, and it unfits them for the more active duties of life." "That's a blatant lie," I shouted, flushing self-consciously as 3,000 pairs of eyes were focused upon me. "For Mr. Edson will be here shortly, and you can see for yourselves." In a moment there was an uproar. "Put that fellow out!" yelled he of the red face, springing toward me in the crowd, his drunkenness disappearing to a certain extent before his towering wrath. "Yes," said I, dismayed. "Put the liar out," pointing at Waldron. Several men stepped between us, thus preventing actual violence. In the lull which followed, the speaker began again. "I beg the gentleman's pardon." His special emphasis caused a titter in some quarters. "I was simply giving expression to an idea which seemed to have general acceptance, and indeed I was told this by a member of the professor's own family." I gritted my teeth in impotent rage. "But I hope it is as the man says, of course. I hope Professor will appear later in the evening." By this time, a fair portion of the audience was in sympathy with the speaker. Seeing this, he proceeded at once to the subject he was eager to discuss. "Hear me say at the start that I am heartily in sympathy with all that education does for humanity, and nowhere in all my experience as a public speaker have I had before me such fine examples of enlightened and educated citizens as I have tonight. However, there is one idea which the professor," mentioned with a shrug of the shoulders, "has upheld in a right smart number of his speeches. An idea, I say, which I desire to combat and overthrow tonight. It is the idea that the Negro should receive the same education as the white man." Cries of "Hear, hear," and applause from various parts of the house. I see I had not miscalculated the culture of this audience. Applause. "I must ask pardon for quoting at some length from my recent book, which has gained some favor, I believe." Renewed applause. "It has been thought by some of our friends that the Negro is our equal by creation. I wish to give scriptural proof that this is a delusion and a snare. Now, it says in the good book," here the speaker rolled up his eyes and used his holiest tone, "that God created man in his own image. Was God a Negro? If not, then the man he created couldn't be a Negro, for he was created in the image of God. I'm here to say that the Negro was not created at all. He was developed before Adam's time, and the first mention of him is the account of the marriage of Cain to a beast, a negress in the land of Nod. Now, this spreads a splendor of light upon the inspired record. It was this sin which led to the rejection of Cain's offering, and it will likewise lead to the rejection of anyone who will not consign forever the Negro and his progeny to their proper place." Applause. "God has said to man to have dominion over all the earth, and because we are not obeying God's command in showing this beast Negro his place, because we believe in the blasphemous theory that man is divided into 5 races, the Negro, the Malay, the Indian, the Mongolian, and the Caucasian, because some of us teach our children this infamous belief which has been the cause of all our wars and will be until the iniquitous races are swept from under heaven and taught to bow to the white man as their master, because of all these things, I say, we are suffering today. We ask for rain and we get drought. We pray for prosperity and we get want, for happiness, and behold, misery and wretchedness, and disappointment and grief. Nay, let us rise up and assert our dominion as direct descendants of the first pyre." Applause. Now, if our first parents had never sinned, it is evident that God would not have cursed the ground for them, and have bidden them earn their living by the sweat of their face. But as the human race would multiply, it is evident that some tilling of the soil would be necessary. Therefore, it would only seem natural that some animal with almost human intelligence should have been provided for tilling the ground for man. The Negro, with his great muscular strength and powers of endurance, was evidently intended for this very thing. He makes a good servant, but never let him think of becoming a master. There's no country or nation on the face of the globe that is ruled or ever can be ruled by a Negro. Tremendous applause. There is something in the Anglo-Saxon which will ever make him rise up in revolt against such a being as his master. He will never submit to it. Renewed applause. This fact that the Negro is a beast is further shown by his anatomical makeup. In my book, I show conclusively, I believe, that the skull of the Negro differs widely from that of the white man. His humerus approximates that of the ape. His skin is black. His hair is woolly and is set differently in the skin from that of the white man. His arms are long. His clavicle and ribs remind one of the same structures in the chimpanzee. In all this we see that whatever differences characterize the Negro, he approximates the brute in every particular. Thus, science as well as Scripture classes him as brute, and all other races are the result of amalgamation of man and brute. Give the Negro suffrage? By no means. Educate him? Only for manual labor, that he may better serve his master, the white man. If he multiplies too rapidly, send him away, and do not fail to carry out the divine command, subdue the earth. O ye members of the academic family, I call upon y'all to get some idea of the royal family to which you belong. Be not partakers of the sin of Cain. Rise to a conception of the place of man to have dominion throughout the earth. Teach your fellow man that education and wealth and happiness and religion and government and power are for the white man and him alone. Cheers and applause. Amid the uproar that followed these remarks, Waldron sat down, mopping his brow and receiving on all sides congratulations. Just as I began to expect Stanton to step out upon the platform, I saw another speaker being pushed toward the front by his friends. "Clark! Clark! Here's Senator Clark!" was the cry heard on all sides as this gentleman took the platform. His eyes flashed fire as he began thus. "Gentlemen, I came here tonight to hear the educational problems of our state discussed by a man who I have reason to believe is thoroughly competent to handle such a subject. That he should be unaccountably delayed this evening is a cause of great regret to me. I cannot believe, however, that the implication made in the remarks to which we have listened is a just one. I am inclined to believe with the young man who interrupted that the professor will yet arrive. I cannot, however, listen to sentiments like the ones just voiced regarding the Negro race without a protest. That the Negro problem has been solved, only a fool or a knave would care to contend. I don't know that anatomy or Scripture have very much to do with the problem in hand." Hisses. "And I shall pause only long enough to show you the folly of such arguments. The speaker said that in his anatomical makeup, the Negro approaches the brute creation, and the deduction seems to have been that the Negro is a brute. Now, anatomists tell us that the white man approaches very nearly to the anatomical structure of the hog. Therefore, by his own course of reasoning, he will pardon me for saying it,
I might feel justified in calling the gentleman who preceded me a hog.
Laughter and hisses.
If, however, it is the belief of those who are here assembled that the Negro is human, though degraded, will not the same forces which have lifted us Caucasians above our barbarian forefathers serve also to elevate the Negro? I cannot see that it helps us very much to try to discover the link that connects the human to the brute world. I'd rather employ my time searching for that brighter link that joins the human to the divine. We would not be numbered with those who emphasize the evil, ignoring the good in their fellow beings. We ought to believe in encouragement rather than repression. We who are true to our country's best interests wish to do something for the uplift of this unfortunate race.
Hisses and applause.
If the South is to rise socially and intellectually, it must be through the social and intellectual uplift of her inhabitants. Now, when 1/3 of her inhabitants are denied the privileges of education and true religion, the progress of the whole South is thwarted. I believe that any attempt to arouse old-time hatred against this race is not only foolish, but it is dastardly and impolitic.
Hisses mingled with applause.
I am a Southerner born and bred.
Applause.
I love our Southern institutions. I desire to make the most of our Southern resources. For this cause I have given my consent to occupy the office I now hold.
Tremendous applause.
It is on this account that I wish to see the past forgotten, and every eye turned toward the future. The South has great things before it, and I am one to hail with delight every advance in our section, be it educational, commercial, or industrial.
Prolonged applause.
I was educated in the North at one of the best Eastern colleges, but some of the educational theories generally held in the North I do not share.
Redoubled applause and cheers.
Though I cannot agree with the former speaker in the most that he has advanced, I grant him this much, that the Anglo-Saxon, whether rightly or wrongly, I shall not attempt to say, feels a repugnance for the Ethiopian.
Cries of yes, yes.
Now, I maintain that such a repugnance makes it practically impossible for the two races to be educated together, at least for the present.
Applause.
This same repugnance makes the propriety of giving the Negroes the franchise at least questionable.
Uproarious applause.
That they should be utterly deprived of education and the franchise, I am not willing to admit, and accordingly would recommend as the sanest and most satisfactory solution of the whole problem, colonization. Let the Negroes be assigned to certain territories, just as the Indians have been. Let them be self-governing so far as possible, and let all the civilizing agencies employed in behalf of the Indian be employed in behalf of the black man.
Feeble applause.
Or, if it seems best, deportation might be employed. To the south of us lie great fertile islands and groups of islands. Should it ever happen that these come under our jurisdiction, it would seem to me providential. The Negro could there find his own appropriate climate, and could share the interests of those of his own race already residing there. All the advantages of colonization could there be obtained with this additional advantage. The colony would not be surrounded by people of a different race who would be disputing boundaries and preying upon the weak and ignorant. The soil would lend itself easily to cultivation, and the experience in southern cotton fields and orange groves would not come amiss in causing the islands to produce abundant sustenance for all its inhabitants. I commend this view of mine to your earnest and serious consideration, and should the day ever arrive when these islands will be open to us, I hope that they may be used in the solution of the greatest problem now confronting our nation, namely, what shall we do for the American Negro? And now I believe that my prediction has come true regarding the arrival of the professor, for that noise at the stage door doubtless announces his coming. I thank you for your courteous hearing."
Before the applause had died away, Stanton stepped out upon the platform. Recognizing him as the private secretary of Mr. Edson, the audience became quiet. But before he could speak, an outcry was started by Seeger. Shouts of, "Put him out! Shoot the blank nigger! Don't let the nigger talk!" were mingled with angry curses and execrations. I noticed him make a quick motion toward his hip pocket. I grappled with him, but the crowd hindered my efforts. With one hand, he leveled a revolver at Stanton and strove to keep me back with the other. I made a swift pass at the weapon and struck out a flash and a loud report as a bullet buried itself high up at the back of the platform. "Gentlemen," said Stanton calmly, as if nothing disconcerting had happened, "I request that the disturber be removed at once and placed under arrest, and that you give your undivided attention to a message from Mr. Edson." Instantly I had a dozen helpers, and 2 policemen at the door took charge of the miscreant. "This is Mr. Edson's message," Stanton was saying, as I again entered. "I shall arrive in 20 minutes. That which has hindered Mr. Edson's earlier arrival is nothing less than a nervous collapse occasioned by his incessant toil before the public for the last 40 days. A murmur of sympathy from some of the audience. That I have told you the exact nature of his complaint can be proved by the affidavit of his physician. When I further state that he has been unable to sleep for 36 hours until just an hour and a half ago, and that the physician objected strongly to waking him, but did so in order that this engagement might be kept, you will understand how solicitous Mr. Edson is that you should hear his message. Applause. Because of his extreme weakness, it will be necessary for him to speak very briefly, and he has asked me to make whatever preliminary remarks seemed necessary to prepare the way for his concise summary. The question, "What shall we do for the American Negro?" has been raised here and freely discussed. I wish to be privileged to add a few remarks to what has been said. It has been suggested that the Negro is incapable of high mental or moral development. I beg to inquire what right we have to make such an affirmation. Have the rights of the Negro been so carefully fostered? Have his opportunities for self-improvement been so varied and numerous that it can be said, after giving him time, education, protection, and kindly care, the Negro has deteriorated? I have often heard it said that the South has done more for the Negro than any other part of the world could or would have done. I do not contradict this assertion, but it appears to me an evasion of the real question. The thought is not, how much are we doing for the Negro as compared with what the North is doing for the Chinaman or England is doing for the factory children. It is easy enough to find instances of neglect in others, but such instances do not excuse our own neglect. I do not urge you to consider how much the South owes the Negro, how it took his earnings for 200 years and enriched itself, how it debased him to the level of the chattel, and now seeks to find in this compulsory debasement an indication, if we are to believe some of the remarks heard here tonight, of the natural degeneracy of the race. I believe that history will bear me out in the statement that any race, when enslaved for a number of years, deteriorates. Take the Hebrews, for example, God's chosen people with the blood of the patriarchs flowing in their bodies. When they had been enslaved for 400 years in Egypt, they became so craven-spirited that many times their long-suffering God was ready to cast them off. During the dark days of the wilderness experience, they so frequently evinced their unfitness to establish a great kingdom and maintain its dignity and laws that God kept them wandering around for 40 years, until the old craven-spirited generation had died off. Some of these older ones were so frightened when they didn't see where their daily rations were coming from that they began to sigh for Egypt with its flesh pots and onions and garlic, just as many of the older Negroes today are longing for the good old days before the war. This was said in such characteristic Negro fashion that many who had listened frowningly hitherto laughed in spite of themselves, and gave the closest of attention thenceforth. Again, when the Israelites were just on the border of the new land, the land which flowed with milk and honey, the sight of the great nations, the giants and the walled cities, caused them to be faint-hearted, so that they wept and rebelled and planned to return to Egypt. But God's purposes kept marching right on. During all their wanderings, God was contriving to educate the people and fit them for the responsible position they were to occupy among the nations. Through their leader, Moses, they were being taught laws and discipline. One of the first things they did when the laws were given was to break them. They had so long been held as irresponsible persons that it took severe dealings before they learned the meaning of law. The Israelites had to be taught the rudiments of religion. Their hard life had crushed out many of the finer traits of character, such as love and reverence. The religion of the Negro is very crude as yet. The other day I witnessed a Negro baptism. Now, I firmly believe that this ordinance of immersion is a beautiful symbol of the believer's death to sin and resurrection to newness of life. But when I saw their method of administering this ordinance, I was convulsed with laughter. I couldn't help it. It took 6 men to carry each candidate into the water, and with screams and kicks, the candidates made it interesting for the 6. Then, when they had been raised from the water, they would stand shouting "Glory!" at the top of their voice until so out of breath and exhausted that they had to be carried back to the shore. Prolonged laughter. You laugh at this, and so did I. But I tell you, I think such a procedure should be dealt with in severity rather than in levity. You remember that at last even Moses, the meekest of men, became out of patience with the incompetence of the people, and he perished just on the border of the Promised Land, while young Joshua, the optimistic spy who said, "We are well able to overcome it," took the new generation into their inheritance. I do not know whether a Joshua is yet to come who will lead the Negro race into its rightful estate. A Moses is here today and unrecognized. The statesmen, the organizers, the educators, the religious leaders of today are like Moses, fitting the people for citizenship. The South has found itself face to face with the greatest problem of our national history. After the war, the men of the South went to destitute homes. They faced blasted hopes, shattered political and industrial systems. They were commanded to make bricks without straw. Many prophesied nothing but ruin for the South and degradation for the Negro. The results have been proven the superior material in both races. 250 years of servitude would have blotted out many a people. A few years of freedom from restraint, when the safeguards of home and family life are lacking, would ruin nearly any people. And the construction of a civilized, organized, enlightened nation out of the wrecks of former systems might well stagger the strongest of heart. The trials of the past should serve to draw the two races closer together. The interests of the two races are one. The white man cannot make laws discriminating against his black brother without reflecting discredit upon himself. The white man who closes his shop or factory against the black man as such is thereby showing his own littleness and thwarting the progress of the South. The black man who cherishes envy and hatred against his white brother is not yet truly emancipated. The South is advancing, is bound to advance. Out of devastated fields, new plantations are arising. Land formerly unoccupied because of the easy life of the landholder is now subdued and productive. Out of the ashes following in the path of the invading army have arisen fairer dwellings and more populous districts. Where ran the bridle path of old, today runs the railway. Where the rivers ran soft and undisturbed, now is heard the plash of propeller or rattle of factory. Where the tinkle of the banjo and the shuffle of feet beguiled the midnight hours, now resounds the roar of traffic, the rattle of machinery, and the march of the employed. The romance of the past has given place to the effective activity of today. The future will witness yet greater progress. Applause. In all this advancement, the Negro has not been without his share. I could tell you of scores of colored boys who have worked all summer picking cotton at 25 to 50 cents per hundredweight so that they might go to school in the winter. Slavery kept the Negroes illiterate. Today, the majority of this people favor education, flock to the schools, and make fair progress. Various expedients for the further uplift of this race have been suggested. I cannot believe that the first speaker's suggestion of indiscriminate repression can have any weight here tonight. The senator's suggestion of colonization is one that has gained considerable favor. We must remember, however, that to change the abode of 1/3 of the population of the South would lead to serious disarrangement in the industrial world. Many of the plantations, groves, and factories are almost entirely dependent upon the Negro for the heavy labor. The Negroes were imported because their industrial worth was appreciated, and deporting them would surely cause industrial and commercial disaster. No, my friends, I think that nothing is to be gained and much is to be lost by deporting the Negroes. It would be simply shifting our responsibility, not lessening it. While we may not change their abode, we must change their relation to the world. It is no time to discuss the sensitiveness of Southern pride. At any cost, the Negro must receive justice. White men, whether in the North or South, must not bar the way against the great forces of education and enlightenment which would uplift the Negro. I believe that education can meet the need of both races. So long as our public schools keep but 4 months a year, so long as our legislature is parsimonious in making school appropriations, just that long will the South be crippled and incompetent. Ignorance is more expensive than education. Though the wealth of the South is depleted, though lack of funds lends caution to every forward movement, a liberal educational policy is indispensable to the best interests of our beloved Dixie. I do not speak of book learning alone. Much of our education is not practical because not worked out with heart and hand. Many mistakes in the past have resulted from an attempt to gain the superstructure without first laying the foundation broad and deep. Strengthen home ties, encourage hard work, land ownership, and the acquisition of the trades. Fit some to be teachers and missionaries for their own people. Repress the vicious by swiftly visited but lawful punishments. Extend the bonds of sympathy throughout the land. Let the South feel that the nation at large is interested in these great Reconstruction problems. Let philanthropists, both North and South, aid in the establishment of new industries, the maintenance of libraries, schools, and churches. May the day soon come when there shall be no South, no North, no Caucasian, no Ethiopian, but hand shall join hand in the vast brotherhood of Americans. Our fair Columbia has been likened to a skilled musician playing upon a mighty organ. Her hands are upon the keys, she opens one combination of stops, and there pours forth the tune so dear to German hearts, My Fatherland. A different set of stops is employed in rendering the Marseillaise. God Save the Queen is the next selection. Then comes the lively, rollicking air, St. Patrick's Day in the Morning. With surpassing tenderness of touch, Dixie is played. And then there steals forth, low, sweet, tremulous with appeal and laden with fond recollections, Way Down Upon the Swanee River. Finally, with all the stops open and all the manuals coupled, the great organ quivers and rocks as it pours forth the deep, full tones of our national anthem, My Country, 'Tis of Thee, Sweet Land of Liberty. Mr. Edson, coming in at this moment, found a quiet and attentive audience. In a few well-chosen words, he advocated that a state university be established in Tallahassee, paying special attention to the teaching of agriculture, dairying, stock-raising, and domestic economy. That such university be accessible to all residents of the state, regardless of color or sex. He pled for the establishment of a number of normal and of manual training schools throughout the state. He suggested uniform requirements for teachers of district schools, a system of graded grammar and high schools in towns of a given size. His remarks were received thoughtfully, but not with enthusiasm. He remained after the meeting had been adjourned, and answered a few questions. End of section 21. Read by James K. White, Chula Vista.